September 2nd, 1945. Japan surrendered, the Allies are victorious. Secret communication was crucial to the victory, and to ensure the secrecy, primarily three codes were used: the German Enigma, the Japanese Purple Code, and the US Navajo Code. Very few people knew how much these codes significantly affected the outcome of the war. World War II could be considered by many the biggest war of all time. It contained two major forces, the Axis and Allied powers. The Allied powers consisted of the United States, Great Britain, the Soviet Union, and France, while the Axis powers included countries such as Germany, Italy, and Japan. By 1931, these three powers began expanding their territories into other countries, and these countries were practically defenseless against their attacks. When Germany invaded Poland on September of 1939, the war started. This war will eventually lead to major losses, even for the Allies. In total, 55 million died, 30 million of them being civilians. Perhaps even more devastating to the Axis powers was compromising the confidentiality of the Enigma Code and the Purple Code. The Enigma Code, also known as Red to the Americans, was first used in 1923 and created by the Nazis. It was considered by the Germans to be impossible to decipher. It would prove to be one of the first major tests the Allies had to face. Fortunately, some messages were finally deciphered in the 1940s by the Allied powers. Cracking the code for the British was mostly due to Alan Turing's bomb machine, a decoding machine built specifically for breaking the Enigma code. The Turing bomb became a huge success due to the help of Polish knowledge in the brain of mathematician Alan Turing. Through Alan Turing's college years, he experimented with different types of decoding machines as he pioneered the modern computer and in turn created the Turing bomb. The Turing bomb tested every possible rotor position for the purpose of cracking the code. Rotors are used as a method of cryptography. On the Enigma machine, there was a rotor cylinder holding 3 and eventually 4 alphabetical rotors. The rotors would spin after each letter was typed and decipher each letter separately. The correctly encrypted letters appeared on the lid of the machine, a window for easy viewing. When the Enigma machine was used to encipher messages, each letter of the code would be typed on the keyboard, similar to a typewriter. The machine would automatically cipher the letters for you, though an additional worker was required to handwrite the new message. Despite the tediousness, the Enigma machine made it easy for the Germans to secretly share strategic information and difficult for the Allies to intercept the messages. Before the Turing bomb, the only way to decipher messages was by simply taking educated guesses, and since the code settings were changed daily, this proved to be a major challenge. The code-breaking team was stationed at Bletchley Park, where they used trial and error to seize enemy messages throughout the war. There were so many combinations of settings in the Enigma machine, it would be impossible to crack the code in a person's lifetime. The Enigma code settings were changed every 24 hours on the actual machine. This was possible in a simple way. Settings were changed by plugging wires in different locations. Using rotor wheels, the Germans could communicate secretly. Even if a codebreaker possessed a machine, that person would struggle to decipher it because they would not know the correct settings necessary.
It was important because the Germans used code to encipher their messages that they sent over the radio between their various headquarters. The British were able to crack that code by basically recreating the Enigma machine and then running the daily codes through a basic computer that was about the size of a whole building. And eventually they came up with a system where they could actually read the German code.
Even today, some of the messages have still never been deciphered. The Enigma code was so effective that the Japanese even made their own version based on it. Japanese Baron Hiroshi Oshimi, the creator of the Japanese Code 97 alphabetical typewriter, bought an Enigma machine to create his code using the same techniques. However, unlike the German code, this code used a second electrical typewriter that automatically typed the ciphertext itself. The purple switchboard contained 25 connections, which could be arranged to 6 alternate pairs of connections, yielding 70 trillion possible arrangements. These arrangements would determine the method of encryption. Luckily, the US had a cryptography expert, Francis A. Raven, who discovered patterns in these Japanese messages. Each month was broken into 3 10-day segments in which a pattern was found. The US capitalized on this fortunate discovery to seize and break countless purple messages, even some that pertained to Pearl Harbor. If the US had taken action with these plans, the infamous bombings may not have happened. On the contrary, the United States military had a secret code for themselves. It is World War I. 2 American soldiers are found speaking in an unfamiliar tongue. This began a new era, an era intertwined with native languages serving as military codes. United States Marines advancing across the Pacific island Saipan during World War II trudged through the extremities of the lush wilderness and opaque sugarcane plantations. The absolute darkness in Saipan's unique physical geography served as cover for the hidden Japanese soldiers who aimed their weapons towards the incoming Americans. A few minutes later, bombs began raining from above. The American gunners were unaware that US soldiers had already secured the enemy position. The troops tried desperately to convince the artillery commanders to cease the attack, but they weren't convinced. Often, Japanese enemies would try their hand at impersonation, for some of them sounded identical to the typical American soldier. Without assurance, headquarters continued bombing the position. Soon enough, another pleading Marine radioed to headquarters, begging them to stop the bombardment. This time, there was a response. "Do you have a Navajo?" They did, in fact, have a Navajo with them. He hurried to the radio and spoke in the Navajo code. Headquarters received this message and, now being certain that they were bombing their own, ceased the artillery attack. As confidence in the code built, the use of it increased. The Navajo code itself was quite complicated as words changed with pitch change and pronunciation. The idea to use the Navajo language for the code originated from Philip Johnston. Nobody expected the idea to work, but clearly, since not a single coded message was ever broken, it turned out to be arguably one of the biggest factors of World War II.
So, in the Pacific battlefields, the Marine Corps used Navajo code talkers, as they call them, to operate their radios. And the Navajo radio operators would talk to each other in Navajo. The Japanese would pick up the radio transmissions, but no one in the Japanese army knew how to speak Navajo, so they couldn't break any of those codes, which really ensured that the Marine Corps command messages that they sent back and forth were unbreakable.
Qualities of exchange, exploration, and encounter are found in many aspects of the coded messages used in World War II. There is an obvious element of exchange as militaries communicated strategical messages concerning the war through code. For each of the forces, intercepting the other's messages required little effort. However, decoding them was a different story. The race to crack the opposing side's code led to the exploration of new ideas that would successfully decipher the messages. After testing hundreds of methods, spending hundreds of days, and using trial and error, codes began to crack, except for the Navajo code. During that process, the workers encountered many issues, hence the trial and error. Because of these codes, today's world has been forever changed. The success and efficiency of the Allies was solely dependent on the ability to crack the German Enigma and Japanese Purple. Equally important was the inability of the Axis powers to crack the US Navajo code. Most certainly, the length of the war would have noticeably increased.